Good morning and good evening, everybody. Um, today is today is a Memorial Day. Let's take a minute and salute all our military personnel who lost their lives in protecting our countries and our people, and also with this COVID situation, all our frontline doctors, workers who sacrifice their lives to protect our health and our families. Last week, we talked about various symptoms of stress, what is stress, and how can we recognize stress. And we also talked about what happens when we are stressed out. And I discussed about uh, two hormones which are getting released, which are a lymphocytotoxic, and also we talked about cortisol, which is an immune suppressant, and from an Ayurvedic perspective, we talked about Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, three doshas, and two important subdoshas, which is um, Pranavayu and Sadhaka Pitta. When they go out of balance, that's when we can see that either we have high levels of anxiety or stress. Now, today's discussion is focused around causes of stress. Um, what causes stress, and how do we, what are the various options available in an integrative stress management protocols to really help us. I will not be getting into details of protocols, but at least I'll talk about various protocols. Now, what are the various causes of stress? We can categorize them into two. One is external and second is internal. What are some of the external factors which can cause stress? And as simple as we going to a new college, that also put us to stress because there'll be a lot of unknowns. We'll be wondering who will be our roommate, a dorm mate, and will they be compatible to us, right? Starting with that, we think that it's a very a good beginning. We are starting a college, but every event comes with some element of stress. So it's very important to understand what are those events and how do we really manage them so that we don't put our body through this. We talked about last week about fight or flight response on a continuous basis and put it through so much of stress and eventually causing illness. Um, as we go on, these various causes, death of a spouse, death of a close family member, or a a friend. Similarly, digital toxicity. That's one of the things people are talking about. Very high. People are talking very frequently is digital toxicity. Other day, I was reading a book where they said even comparing a digital toxicity with alcohol in our blood, they're saying it's more or less equal when you're, for instance, they were talking about an example of driving while under digital toxicity, getting distracted. They're comparing that with a level of alcohol in our blood. Now, how can we even minimize digital toxicity? Environment pollution and inability to cope up change. These days, life is all about change. And from 100 years past to now, The difference is the change is more frequent. We have to, on a continuous basis, to really cope up with this change. It can be change in job, it can be change in, you know, the economy. I mean, number of changes, and the number of changes which we are encountering now are much more than what it was in the past. So we got to also have um, built-in abilities to really cope up with these kind of changes, and also ability to differentiate between work and leisure, especially with this COVID-19 situation. And most of us are working from home maybe for next 2 to 3 months, and we don't know how long, we will be stuck inside our houses. So we need to really figure out how do we take breaks, and when can we separate the work from our leisure. Then lack of exercise. uh, I was also reading Dr. Andrew um, Weil, a book on general healthy living. One of the things um, he was talking about the importance of walking. I mean, if you look at it, there are only maybe two beings on this earth who can walk on two legs. The rest of them walk on four legs. So walking, he said, it's the best exercise because it stimulates pretty much the entire system. I mean, imagine um, if you hold a stick, just put it straight on the floor, it just falls down. And imagine the amount of coordination required for us to walk straight. I mean, we take it for granted, but the number of things which our brain gets from our eyes, from our ears, to really maintain an equilibrium of our body to make us walk straight, although we take it for granted. So he says that walking is the best exercise. Again, lack of exercise can also be one of the causes of stress. And we are talking about various causes of stress. And um, at present, I'm talking about the external factors. And the other thing is negative media from various sources. I mean, we've been continuously dumped by a lot of negative information. How do we really filter it out? How do we even eliminate, avoid some of these things? That also I'll be talking in our future sessions, how we can eliminate, filter out, right? A systematic way of filtering out. Similarly, not being happy with our job, right? Again, anything which we love, we really don't need to put effort. It just becomes, we will be working at our peak efficiency. If you don't love what we do, it also adds up a lot of stress. So how do we really, so think deep and figure out, do we really love what we do, or we're just doing it for sake of doing? So those are some of the other reasons. Again, not being happy with the race, and a lot of gender issues. Similarly, finally, with anything which is personal life, where we are not happy about certain things or people. Now, these are all some of the causes, external causes. Let's get into the internal causes. Um, if we think about, who do we talk to the maximum amount of time in our lives? It's us. It's we talk to ourselves the most. We ask a lot of questions to ourselves, consciously, unconsciously. There's always a chat going on between us and our inner self, right? Or between us and our body. So, so it's very, very important to really understand what are some of the internal causes of this stress. I would put the number one as resentment. What is resentment? Anger multiplied by thousands of factors, right? Thousands of times is resentment. And anger is a burst of emotion for a second or for a few minutes. Resentment is anger multiplied by number of times we are replaying that particular event, that stressful event, or a memory. And every time when we are replaying, we are putting our body and mind through this emotional turmoil. So we have to be extremely careful with resentment. The other one is prolonged grieving. Um, as I discussed, we do, in our journey, we do lose our loved ones. How do we handle loss of our loved ones? And what is a process of grieving? It's extremely important. Lots of rituals are out there to really help us to grieve properly, and also I would say we'll never be able to come out of loss of our loved ones. It can be mother or it can be any loved ones, but we got to have a a way to handle it. The other internal causes of lack of purpose. Sometimes when we feel that we don't have purpose in life, it also adds up lots of stress. We feel worthy, we feel that we are not worthy, or we start comparing ourselves with others. So that also triggers a lot of stressful, events in our brain and in our body. So we got to figure out how do we create a purpose in our life. Similarly, loneliness. I mean, that can be a killer. So how can we address loneliness? That can also cause a lot of stress. And these days, there's also talk about incivility. So they're saying that there's a lot of rise in incivility in the society. That means, how are we addressing somebody? How are we talking to somebody? What are our tolerance levels? Uh, for example, I mean, I keep observing while I'm driving, people would be, waiting around to just honk. Again, sometimes there might be a older person driving carefully, right? And or sometimes a person might, I mean, there might be many reasons, might be new to that subdivision, or he might be from out of state. So there might be so many reasons which can happen. So when we don't have tolerance, when we don't have, when we don't maintain that civility, that also can put a lot of stress in the entire system. And um, again, we talked about emotions, we talked about resentment. So one of the things which is very important is also our belief system. I mean, I'll go into details of how do we really assess our belief system, which of the beliefs are causing unhealthy emotions. Again, um, when I was reading one of the books on emotions, I mean, there's a great book called Get Well Again. Um, he talked about three kinds of, the author talked about three kinds of emotions or beliefs: unhealthy beliefs, and, positive beliefs, and healthy beliefs. So we got to cultivate more of healthy beliefs. So when our belief system is also faulty, it also continuously generates lots of these unhealthy emotions. Again, some personalities also, uh, there are lots of questionnaires out there which will also help us to assess. Again, we got to take a professional help, but one thing which is very important is while we are taking help from a lot of people, maximum control is with us. So we also need to do some kind of an assessment of what kind of personality do we have. Is it stress prone or is it stress resistant? Or we have personality to cope up with stress. Again, there are lots of questionnaires. I suggest you look at it and see, going through it and figuring out, identifying the areas where we can, our weak links, our vulnerable areas, where we can really fix them. And finally, the last one I would say is um, lack of spiritual practices. Um, so it's very important based on our religion, we have certain spiritual practices. It can be meditation, it can be even in Eid Mubarak to everybody around the world. It can be even namaz based on if you're a Muslim, or you know if you based on your religion, churches if you're Jews. So but it's very very important that we have certain spiritual practices which will also help us, and that in the times of at the times of you know um, challenging times. So it's really critical that we should have certain spiritual practices based on our religion and the belief system. Now, one of the things I was also looking at Dr. Holmes and Dr. Rahe from Washington School of Business. They came up with a very interesting, I would say, scoring system. It's called, they said, life adjustment scoring system or stress scores. It's a very, very interesting scoring system. What they have done is they gave scores to each and every life event, right? They gave death of spouse as 100, divorce 73. Let me just look at this paper, right? And jail term 63. I mean, all the way, each of these events have a score. For example, going to a vacation, festive season, right? Even accomplishments, when we accomplish something in life, that also comes with certain stress score. So how do we really manage these stress scores when there are various events which are happening in our life, similarly financial issues? Now, um, what is the relevance of this stress scores? I mean, based on what I read, it looks like they did some survey. According to the survey, it is very good idea to understand what is our accumulated or cumulative stress score in the last 12 months and try to keep it as low as possible, right? And they say that if the stress score is more than 200 points, accumulated stress score the last 12 months, 49% of the people, they have reported some kind of illness. And who are those 49% of people who are not able to manage their stress properly? Similarly, 9% of those people who have accumulated less than 200 points within last 12 months also reported illness. So some people are, that means some people are might be vulnerable even for at a lower stress scores than 200. Now, 51% of the people haven't reported any illness who also have more than 200 points of stress score. That means those are the people who are really managing their stress really well. And the other statistics is people with Total point scores in the top third reported 90% more illness than who are in bottom third. So how do you really, what does it tell? It tells that we got to really watch the stressful events and how we are coping up with those events. Again, this is some statistics um, for you guys to really figure out or watch your stress scores. Again, two things which I want to highlight in the last 15 minutes discussion is, one is figure out what's your personality, identify your belief system, and I'll give you some tools in my next session. Identify, look or analyze your belief system, figure out which beliefs are triggering unhealthy emotions. Similarly, figure out your accumulated stress score. Now, in next few sessions, I'll be maybe one or two sessions I'll take where I'll be focusing on integrative stress management. How do we really manage this stress? I'll be going through a few topics. Number one would be mindfulness. That's where I'll get into meditation, mental imagery, visualization, right? Pranayama, yoga, all those which will help us to yoga nidra. My guru, Dr. Halpan, is an expert in yoga nidra. So I'll also give you a few pointers and about yoga nidra. Then Ayurveda. What do we have in Ayurveda, which can be, herbs from the east, herbs from the west, lots of panchakarma therapies, which also help us to de-stress. Similarly, marma points and marma therapy, where we can use acupuncture, we can use aromatherapy and a simple massage at the marma points to really, helps us to reduce stress. Now, from an Ayurvedic perspective, what we will be looking at is how can we control pranavayu and sadhaka using lots of various techniques. Similarly, aromatherapy. What are the essential oils which are useful to manage our stress, and what are the various techniques which we can use within aromatherapy? For instance, I can use essential oils for bathing, or I can use essential oils for massage, diffuser, sprays. So I'll be getting into more of those details, and I'll also connect, slightly aromatherapy with, Ayurveda and other sciences. Then connecting with nature. As I talked last week, when we are not whole, complete, right? We also tend to get stressed out and our anxiety levels will be high. Now, one of the ways to really connect back to our roots is to be in the nature. That's an amazing thing. I mean, spending some time, no matter where we live, an apartment or a house with a garden. In apartment, we can also have our own small urban garden where we are dealing with plants, and the plant and human interaction is very amazing. You put a seed, let it grow, and so it also, I figured out, it can de-stress ourselves. So how can we connect with nature? Sometimes we might need to take a break and really get out into woods and nature. Similarly, lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle suggestions or rituals we need to follow to help us to de-stress ourselves? And finally, we'll also be talking about nutrition. What are the foods which help us to de-stress ourselves? Now, Mark Twain, he said, "I'm an old man. I know great many troubles, but most of them never happened. So a lot of times we also think about all the negative things which can happen out there. But how many of them are really happening to us, and how many of them are our, you know, based on our belief system, it's triggering these, you know, anxieties, bout of anxieties. Similarly, I'll end today's conversation and I'll open up for question and answer session. It says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. Namaste, everybody, and hope I gave some good insights into causes of stress and what are the various integrative stress management techniques which are out there. Now, I'll open up for question and answer session. Dr. Aditi or Pankaj, do we have any questions? Let me also go into Facebook.
No, Sharat, we don't have any questions as of today.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. And stay safe and see you next week. Thank you.